You haven't lost the ability to love. You've been trained to avoid it. And it's worse because now you call it normal. Today, you call fear maturity. You call coldness balance. You escape peace. You know the scene. The conversation starts strong. Presence, attention, that rare feeling someone is actually there. And then, when it gets real, when it starts asking for something deeper, the other person changes. They don't end it. They don't commit. They don't speak. They just retreat. They reply later, disappear a little, come back like nothing happened, and you pretend you didn't feel it. Because in modern relationships, feeling too much is treated like a mistake. You learn the rule: don't show too much, don't ask too much, don't want too much, don't need anything. You become easygoing. Easygoing on the outside and emotionally amputated on the inside. And the most absurd part, you call that self-control. It isn't. It's conditioning. Conditioning to avoid attachment, to avoid dependence, to avoid exposure, to avoid love. Because love, today, is seen as losing power. Love is saying, you matter to me, and anyone who cares can get hurt, can be rejected, can be replaced. So you protect yourself before the blow even exists. You become strategic, you become light, you become no drama. But no drama has become a mask, a polished mask, a rewarded mask, a mask that says, I don't need anything. And nobody builds intimacy with someone who needs nothing. Here's the truth that stings. You don't fear rejection, you fear being seen. Seen for real, without performance, without control, without the character. Because being seen means this: someone notices you're not as solid as you pretend, that you also want, that you also feel, that you also hope. And hope, today, feels embarrassing. Look around. Everyone wants love, but almost no one wants the price of love. The price is risk. The price is presence. The price is staying when the magic drops. The price is speaking when pride rises. But modern relationships were built with too many exits. An exit in your pocket, an exit on your screen, an exit called the next option. People don't enter a bond, they enter a trial. Let's see. No pressure. Just go with the flow. Translation: don't ask me for depth. Don't ask me for responsibility. Don't ask me for truth. And that's why so many people live a new kind of suffering. Not lonely because there's no one. Lonely because nothing grows roots. You have conversations, you have dates, you have contacts, you have short stories, but you don't have construction. And when night comes, when the phone goes quiet, there's a void nobody posts. A small void until it becomes routine. Then you start saying, people are shallow. Nobody wants anything real. Everyone disappears. Maybe, or maybe you're forgetting something. You're being shaped too. Because what you repeat becomes you. Repeat escape and you become escape. Repeat superficiality and you become superficial. Repeat relationships without commitment and you lose the ability to sustain commitment. Then the most dangerous shift happens. You stop missing depth. You get used to half and you call half normal. So let me ask you, without comfort, are you still telling yourself you're looking for the right person? Or have you noticed you're becoming someone who can't stay when they find them? Because in the end, it's not about who shows up. It's about this. What are modern relationships doing to you?
The problem is bigger than it looks and quieter than you think. What's happening in modern relationships isn't just cultural, it's psychological, it's structural. You're not only meeting people, you're being conditioned. Conditioned to keep everything reversible, to never bet too high, to never build what you can't abandon quickly. And that creates a new kind of relationship. A relationship with an expiration date, even when nobody says it. Most people don't enter a bond, they enter a hallway full of doors. And the most dangerous door is always the same, comparison. Because now the entire world sits next to your relationship, in your pocket, on your screen, one swipe away. Even when you like someone, your mind whispers, what if there's better? What if I'm missing out? What if I'm settling too soon? That whisper destroys the ability to stay. Not because you're weak, because the environment trains it. It trains you to live in possibility, not in decision. And decision today feels violent. Decision excludes. Decision says yes to one person and no to the rest. But the modern mind hates losing options. It prefers the fantasy of infinite lives over the responsibility of one real life. And here it gets ugly. Modern relationships sell freedom but deliver dependence. Dependence on stimulus, dependence on novelty, dependence on validation. You don't just want someone, you want the feeling that you're still wanted. And that changes everything. Because when validation becomes food, intimacy becomes a threat. Intimacy demands something the modern ego struggles to tolerate: consistency. Consistency is repetition, presence without spectacle, loyalty without an audience. And without an audience, a lot of people don't know who they are anymore. You can hear it in the language. No labels, no pressure, just vibing. Often it isn't maturity, it's fear. Fear of being expected, fear of failing, fear of disappointing, fear of committing and discovering you can't sustain it. So the easiest path is chosen. A relationship where nobody can demand anything because nobody promised anything. Then the elegant lie appears. You start treating the other person as an environment, as company, as social anesthesia, not as destiny. And if the other person becomes an environment, they can be replaced like anything else. You pull away without guilt because technically there was nothing. This is the clean trick of modern relationships. It removes the moral weight of abandonment. And the consequence is obvious. Trust dies before it's born. Because how can you trust when you know discomfort might trigger disappearance? So you measure your words. You don't open up. You don't say what you want. You don't show your real need. And the cycle repeats. You don't show because you fear losing. They don't show for the same reason, and you both call it light. But light without truth is emptiness. And that emptiness doesn't stay in the relationship. It enters you. You lose tolerance for normal life. Normal feels boring. Normal feels not enough. You crave the beginning because the beginning gives dopamine, story, ego. But love doesn't live in the beginning. Love lives in the crossing. And the crossing requires something many people are unlearning, staying with discomfort without running. So look at the full picture. The emotional chaos of modern relationships isn't only caused by bad people. It's caused by a system that rewards superficiality, makes escape effortless, glamorizes detachment, turns commitment into risk. And when a system trains escape, complaining that nobody stays becomes pointless. The question isn't why do people disappear? The question is more personal. What part of you already learned to accept being treated like an option? And worse, what part of you already learned to treat others the same way?
Now we go deeper, because here is what almost nobody admits. Modern relationships don't just fail. They reshape your inner world. They change your emotional system, your tolerance, your courage, your ability to sustain. And you don't notice because it looks like normal life. It starts with small adaptations. Don't text too much. Don't reply too fast. Don't show too much excitement. Look busy. Look indifferent. Look hard to get. And the question is simple. Why do you need to look like anything at all? Because you learned the rule. Whoever needs loses. So you start competing, not for love, for power, emotional power. The less you show, the more you control. The less you care, the less you suffer. The more detached you seem, the more desirable you become. That's a tragedy disguised as a game. The outcome is predictable. You train yourself not to feel, then you complain you feel nothing. You train yourself not to open, then you complain there's no intimacy. You train yourself not to depend, then you complain everything is shallow. You build the desert and ask why it doesn't rain. Here's what forms: controlled intimacy. You give with breaks. You speak, but not fully. You show, but not your core. You stay with your hand on the door. Not because you're cold, because you're trying to prevent an old pain, being rejected after you exposed yourself. So you do something smart. You don't give your whole self. That way, if they leave, they didn't take you. They took a portion. It feels like protection. It's self-amputation. Because nobody can love half of you and turn it into depth. When you live behind a persona, you become acceptable, not real. Polished, adaptable, socially perfect. But the persona doesn't love, doesn't suffer, doesn't transform. It performs. Then you live a strange life. You receive attention, but you don't feel seen. You receive compliments, but you don't feel touched. You receive presents, but you don't feel met. Because being met requires risk. And another consequence grows. You begin to distrust love. When someone gets close, you suspect. What do they want? How long will this last? What will it cost me? That isn't wisdom, that's a wound. And an unhealed wound becomes a filter. People stop being people, they become potential threats. Then everything becomes a test. Test loyalty, test interest, test reactions, test boundaries. But constant testing destroys trust. And without trust, there is no rest. Without rest, there is no surrender. Without surrender, there is no love. There's anxiety wearing romance. And there's more. Modern relationships create a new kind of withdrawal. You're with someone, but you miss more. More intensity, more novelty, more validation, more adrenaline. When the early phase fades, you call peace boredom. You call normal life it's over. But it isn't over. The dopamine dropped. And that's where many people get lost. They confuse passion with value, intensity with destiny, euphoria with truth. So when the euphoria leaves, the desire to stay leaves too. Not because the person is wrong, because you've been trained to stay only when there's stimulus. Then your mind adopts a rule. If it's not intense, it's not real. If it's not easy, it's not right. If it's not perfect, I leave. That's not a moral failure, it's emotional immaturity, inability to tolerate frustration. Now, the deepest wound, the biggest side effect of modern relationships is that love becomes a threat. Because love involves dependence at some level, and dependence today is treated like weakness. But someone who depends on nothing loves nothing. They manage, calculate, control. They treat life like a contract and call it peace. But that peace has a cost. It costs your humanity. Because being human isn't being invulnerable. It's having the courage to exist with risk. So here's the unavoidable question. How many times did you leave too early, not because it was wrong, but because you couldn't tolerate feeling? How many times did you call fear wisdom just to protect your ego? Because if that's true, then the problem isn't that nobody loves. The problem is that many people no longer have the inner structure to sustain what they say they want.
Now imagine this. No escape, no excuses. You enter a room, no phone, no friends, no feed, no options, just a table and 2 chairs. In one chair, you. In the other, someone. Someone you always said you wanted. Presence, consistency, desire, character. Someone who doesn't vanish, someone who doesn't play games, someone who doesn't keep you in limbo. They look at you and they aren't asking for performance. They don't want your charm. They don't want your polished version. They don't want your control. They want you. And that already tightens your chest, because being desired is easy. Being known is not. On the table, there's a contract. 1 page, 1 sentence. If you sign, the mental exit disappears. It isn't a prison. You can still walk away, but your mind won't have the modern anesthetic anymore. Relax, there are plenty more. It's gone. No more infinite possibilities as emotional padding. If you stay for real. If you leave, you own the cost. You read the sentence and your body reacts, not rationally, biologically. Withdrawal. Withdrawal from the modern addiction to reversibility. Because what scares you isn't the person, it's the decision. Decision kills fantasy. Decision kills the secret pleasure of feeling like your life is still infinitely open. Resistance rises, dressed as logic. I just need to be sure. I need time. I don't want to rush. I value my freedom. Then the question arrives and breaks the spell. Freedom or fear? If you're honest, you see it. You don't just fear choosing the wrong person. You fear losing the hidden comfort of being able to become anyone. You fear betting and not being able to retreat into spectator mode. You fear dependence because it exposes how little you control. You fear being fully seen and still not being chosen. Then the person across from you speaks calmly. I don't want a character. I don't want half. I don't want a relationship you can abandon without cost. I want presence. I want truth. I want commitment. And you want to run. Not because they're bad, not because it's toxic, not because there's no chemistry. You want to run because this demands character. And character is where? Character is staying when your ego wants to disappear, speaking when pride wants to shut down, sustaining when impulse wants to replace. Then the room changes. The wall becomes a mirror. Your entire relationship history appears. Conversations you abandoned, connections you sabotaged, people you kept close without giving anything real, elegant exits, clean disappearances, sophisticated excuses. And a simple truth lands, hard. You weren't just living, you were training yourself not to belong, not to build, not to commit, training yourself to always keep a root. And now, with no roots, reality wins. Maybe the biggest addiction in modern relationships isn't sex or attention or dopamine. It's possibility, the need to keep everything open because closing a door requires courage. The person slides the pen toward you, slowly. No pressure, just dignity. And you understand, nobody's asking you to be perfect. They're asking you to be whole. Now the final question. Dry, direct, no poetry. Do you sign or do you choose to stay free, free and alone?
Now we name it. Because what has no name controls you. Modern relationships aren't confusing. They're working exactly as designed. Fast, light, disposable, reversible. And it looks like progress until you see what it produces. It produces people who want depth but can only tolerate surface. Relationships that begin with fireworks and die at the first friction. Here's the principle. You become what you practice. Practice escape, and you become escape. Practice I don't get attached, and you become incapable of attachment. Practice relationships where nobody owes anything, and you'll be shocked when nobody stays. It isn't bad luck, it's habit. And the cruelest part is this. Many people aren't searching for someone. They're repeating a pattern until the pattern becomes identity. I'm just like this. I value freedom. I'm intense, but I get bored. I don't do pressure. Translation? I don't know how to sustain. I can't tolerate frustration. I don't know how to talk when it hurts. I don't know how to stay when the magic fades. And it's not evil. It's confusion. Confusing love with a feeling, and feelings pass. Love is not permanent euphoria. Love is repeated decision. But decision, today, feels offensive. Decision closes doors, says yes and loses the rest, lives with consequence. The modern mind wants control, not consequence. It wants a bond that gives everything and demands nothing. Intimacy without vulnerability, company without responsibility, love without risk. That doesn't exist. What exists is emotional consumption. You consume presence when you're lonely, validation when you doubt yourself, sex when you're empty, conversation when you're bored. Then when it fades, you leave. And to avoid looking cruel, you call it a phase, a moment, a process. But the real name is simpler: escape. Building requires something modern life tries to erase: ordinary days, routine, repetition, silence, construction. But ordinary days don't feed the ego. The beginning feeds the ego. The beginning gives a story, gives dopamine, gives identity. But the beginning doesn't give character. Character appears later, when the fantasy dies, when flaws appear, when you meet a real human being, not a dream. And that's where many people fail, not because they lack love, because they want a perfect mirror, someone who never frustrates, never confronts, never requires growth. But real intimacy confronts you. It reveals weakness, exposes avoidance, shows where you run. That's why lightness feels safer. But lightness without truth is emptiness, and emptiness always asks for more novelty. Then you enter a loop. You want connection. When it arrives, you defend. You want intimacy. When it demands truth, you retreat. You want commitment. When it threatens options, you vanish. Then you say, it wasn't meant to be. Maybe it wasn't, because meant to be requires what modern relationships try to remove: responsibility. Your choices are shaping you. Every time you disappear, you become someone who disappears. Every time you avoid the hard talk, you become someone who avoids truth. Every time you replace quickly, you become someone who can't build. So the question isn't, how do I find the right person? The question is, what are you becoming every time you choose the easiest path? Because love isn't an event, it's a way of being. And modern relationships are teaching a way of being. Comfortable, polished, socially normal, but inside, sterile.
Now you can see it. This isn't luck. It's direction. Modern relationships aren't only happening to you, they're shaping you, quietly. And the final question isn't romantic, it's existential. Who are you becoming through the way you love? Love isn't only a beautiful experience, it's training. Every bond trains something.
presence or escape, courage or control, truth or performance. And modern life trains the same muscle again and again: the exit. Quick exits, clean exits, elegant exits, exits without conversation. But what you practice remains, and anyone who practices leaving eventually loses the ability to build a home inside. So here is a simple clarity. Intimacy is not finding a perfect person. Intimacy is sustaining a decision in the real world. And sustaining a decision requires three things modern relationships try to humiliate: presence, risk, responsibility. Presence when the magic drops, risk when you're afraid, responsibility when disappearing would be easier. That does not mean tolerating abuse. It does not mean accepting crumbs. It does not mean shrinking yourself. It means refusing to use freedom as an excuse to never commit to anything. Because there is a kind of freedom that is actually incapacity. Incapacity to belong, to sustain, to be seen. And that freedom ends the same way: emptiness. That's why so many people say, "I just want peace." But often what they want is a relationship that doesn't require maturity. Love without discomfort, bond without vulnerability, depth without risk. Life doesn't give that. Life gives choice. Either you keep living relationships as consumption and become fragmented, always starting, never building, or you accept the question that changes everything. Who do I need to become to be capable of real love? Because love isn't what happens to you, it's what you do with what happens to you. And that's the hard part and the liberating part. You are not only searching for someone, you are being formed by the way you relate. So the direction is clear. If you want depth, treat intimacy as a virtue. Virtue is habit, repetition, character. And character appears when nobody is watching, when there's no audience, no dopamine, no novelty, only you and the choice to stay honest. Let me leave you with an image. Picture your life 10 years from now. Same charm, same patterns, same beginnings, same short stories, and underneath, the same emptiness. Not because nobody showed up, because nothing was built. Now picture the opposite. Not perfect, not invulnerable, but whole. Able to speak instead of vanish, able to sustain instead of replace, able to choose instead of collect. That gives you something rare today, a life with roots. Because in the end, life isn't only giving you relationships, it is transforming you through them.